Shalom, everybody. Live from the Galilee in Yavneo, and I haven't spoken to you in quite a while. Hope everybody's doing well and staying healthy. I wanted to give you a quick update about what's going on here in Israel, and also share with you some thoughts and some lessons from a plague that happened here 2,000 years ago that we can maybe use or find useful for our situation here today. Um, the pandemic seems to be slowing down in Israel, like it seems to be in America and other places in the world. Hi, Jeffrey. And but there are still people dying. It's really sad. And actually, here in Yavneel, I don't know if you heard, but there's a nursing home here that was infected by the virus. I mentioned it. And as of yesterday, the 19th person passed away. Actually, I can show it to you if we just turn around here a little bit. This neighborhood on the hill right behind me, hi Nancy, is called Smedar. There's four main neighborhoods in Yavneel, and in Smedar there's a nursing home there. And sadly, 19 people have passed away. They were evacuated the whole nursing home a while ago, and they moved everybody to Netanya, but the elderly people weren't able to survive. So I'm just davening that everybody who's my age and older, and that's a lot of you out there, you just stay safe, stay in place, and really avoid the temptation of connecting with your children and your grandchildren. Like I said before, even though everybody seems very well and healthy, it's still a dangerous situation for the older people. The younger people, it's not. I spoke to one of my grandsons during the week on Skype, and he says, "Oh yeah, Zaida, me and my two brothers, we had it. A couple of weeks ago, we sort of had a little fever, and we weren't feeling so well. Must have been that." So they really don't look unhealthy, but you gotta keep the distance. So everybody else in Israel, they're starting to go back to work. The Prime Minister gave some guidelines, and people are back at work. My gardener came, and he got rid of the jungle in the backyard yesterday. And also, shopkeepers are opening up. Slowly but surely, everybody is going back to work. And you can see much more activity. Actually, here on the road, I'm noticing more people in their cars and more people walking. Here comes a car. More people walking around, driving, but still, the rules in place are that you need to be 100 meters from your home. There's an exception. You can be 500 meters away from your home if you're doing a sports activity with up to one other person. So it's questionable if my walk is considered a sports activity or not. Who votes? Give me a thumbs up if you think it's a sports activity, and therefore I'm allowed to be 500 meters from my house. Hi, Cindy. Hi, Ken. So I'm 500 meters from my house. It's a beautiful view here, as you can see, of the Yavneel Valley. And it's a stunning day. It's warm, and as the sun is starting to go down, it's still really warm and beautiful here. So my bracha for all of you out there is that you stay safe, stay close to home if you're in a age that is high risk, or also if you have pre-existing conditions, just to stay home, and encourage everybody to stay safe as they get back to work. We are in a period between Passover and Shavuot, the 49-day period where we're counting the days between the day after Passover and the festival of Shavuot, which is the festival where we celebrate the receiving of the Torah at Sinai, at Mount Sinai, the revelation at Sinai. And I made a posting in the newsletter. Some of you, if you saw it, give me a thumbs up, of a colleague of mine who talked about the ancient plague that happened in the 1st century, 2,000 years ago, where 24,000 of Rabbi Akiva's students, Rabbi Akiva was the leading sage of the generation, and 24,000 of his students died in a plague in that year. Rabbi Akiva himself, later on, he lived during the Roman times, and in the Hadrian Revolt, He was tortured to death, burned at the stake. It was a horrible, horrible death. And he died as the flames engulfed him, saying the Shema Yisrael. But before that, he was the leading sage of the generation. And a plague. Now, when I had a number of you, hi Ed, hi Janice, I had a number of you ask, oh, so what exactly was the plague? What was the illness? What did they die from? When the sages give us a discussion about a plague like that, or any kind of illness, we're not talking about a physical lesson to learn. Same way with the coronavirus today. The technological experts, the scientists, the biologists, the geneticists, everybody is trying to search and find the physical mechanism which is the underlying source of the disease and what's causing people to die from the disease. That is at the physical level. But we know, just like in our physical body we have a matching spiritual soul, spiritual energy, everything in the world has its spiritual dimension that causes it to occur. Everything has to happen with God's will. So there's a spiritual dimension. So in as much as there's the physical disease, there's the spiritual lesson also that we have to learn. We have to learn the physical lessons. We call that social distancing. People are talking about coming up with vaccines or treatments. Obviously, we have to do that. But that's at the physical realm. What we want to do, and most of you are doing, many of you are doing, you're all spiritual people out there, you want to try to learn the spiritual lessons. What's the spiritual lesson? I shared some of them already before with you about what I think is going on and the lessons that I'm learning about the coronavirus in terms of being separated physically from people but being spiritually still connected, and what that lesson is for me. But I want to share with you something about this plague that happened 2,000 years ago in the first century here in Israel. And a lot of them were up here. Actually, if I turn this way, we can see Tiberias on the hill. And actually, when I'm allowed to go and travel around, I'll take you on a visit over there. Actually, Rabbi Akiva, the one I mentioned, who had the 24,000 students, was the leading sage of the generation at the time of the Roman period. We can go visit his grave. It's just behind me, just over the hill. And so we can actually go and visit him. It's still here. This is not legends, it's not myths, this is real history, and we can go and see the actual sites where these people are buried. So if we go back 2,000 years ago, and we see that in a short amount of time, when these 24,000 students died, was during this period between Passover and Shavuot. And most authorities say that the period actually was the first 33 days. We're in the 11th day of the counting of the period of the 49 days until Shavuot. And on the 33rd day, that was when the plague stopped, according to most authorities. There's different ways of counting it. So we had all these 24,000 students die within a short period of 33 days. So that's almost 1,000 a day. We understand what that means today, but we need to understand what that means in a much smaller population, in a smaller area, and how that affected it. And not only was it a plague, obviously there were others who died as well, I'm sure, in that plague. I'm sure they had to go into isolation and distance themselves. But what shook the nation of Israel, the Jewish people, from that day 2,000 years ago until today, where we still commemorate it, it's a period of mourning. These first 33 days, meaning from the time when the festival ended, the 7th day of Passover ended, until the 33rd day of the Omer, is a period of semi-mourning for the entire Jewish people. Now, if any of you know Orthodox Jews, it's hard to tell with me, but actually you can. We don't shave or take haircuts, just like mourners, somebody whose parent died. You're in a state of mourning, and therefore you don't go to live entertainment, live music performances. You don't get haircuts, because haircuts are there to make you feel good. Wow, feel great. We're not supposed to feel up when we're mourning. When we're mourning, we want to be spiritually down to really process the grief, and therefore we do things externally, physically, to help assist us get into that spiritual space. And therefore, we don't do live performances of music. So you'll see Orthodox Jews today won't listen to live music. Orthodox Jews around the world will avoid shaving and taking haircuts until it becomes extremely repulsive to other people, and other people start mentioning it, so then you can get a haircut. But I don't want to get a haircut for my own pleasure, to make me feel good, to make me feel up. So right now we're in that mourning period for the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva. Just this past week, Rabbi Bakshi Doron, who was the former chief rabbi of Israel, passed away because of the coronavirus. When we have a leading sage who passes away, it has a big impact on those who value Torah, because these were the people who were sharing their Torah and guiding us and leading us. So the loss of these students had a tremendous impact on us, and therefore it's a time for self-reflection and saying, what's the message to me? Because it's a national tragedy and not just an individual tragedy. It's a tragedy for the Jewish people. So it's interesting, the Talmud discusses this, meaning the contemporaries who were living at the time and just after recorded and discussed this horrible pandemic that occurred in the land of Israel over that short amount of time. And they say, well, why did it happen? Now, obviously, we have to take this in a spiritual way, not in a physical way, a spiritual way. So they say, why did it happen? It says, Ki lo nahagu kavod ze bazeh. They didn't act with kavod, honor and respect, one to the other. Meaning, when we study, when sages study, when students study, right? When I was studying in the study hall to get my rabbinical ordination, you get a study partner. Some of you may know my study partner. We got our rabbinic ordination together, Rabbi Ken Spiro. Anybody know Ken Spiro? He's amazing. He's a Jewish historian, and he's written quite a few books. You can look him up, or I'll put a link in later on. You should get his books. He's a tremendous scholar and historian. He was my study partner. And it's called cooperative learning in modern education. Any educators out there, you'll understand. Rather than having a teacher spoon feed you, they give you a text. You sit down with your study partner, and you learn it together, and you battle it out. What does this text mean? What does it say? What do you think it says? Oh, that doesn't make sense to me. How could you even say such a thing? That contradicts what we learned over there. So that's what goes on in a Torah study hall. And you need a study partner. And the sages say, why did these students of Rabbi Akiva, 24,000, that means there were 12,000 pairs of students, right? They're learning together. Each one had their own pair. It says, Lo na'agu kavod ze bazeh. They didn't act with respect one to the other. So what does that mean? So we have to go into Lashon HaKodesh. We have to go into Hebrew. The Hebrew word for kavod, honor or respect, is kavod. Kaf beit daled. Now in Hebrew, other than any other language, the closest to Hebrew is, or Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language that the Torah is given and written in, is, I would say, chemistry. Because most alphabets, the symbols don't mean anything. A, B, C. What does it mean? It just represents a sound, and it's phonetic. So you string together sounds, and you use these symbols to represent the sounds. And the word doesn't really mean anything. What does the word honor intrinsically mean? Doesn't really mean anything. There are other languages that are pictograms. I had a roommate in university, back in University of Waterloo in Canada. He was a Chinese fellow. His name was Joe Lee. And he taught us a little bit of Chinese. I asked him to teach me. So he had an electric rice pot. So I asked him to show me, what's the word for electric rice pot. So he told me and he showed me the symbol. And the symbol was, electric rice pot was a symbol for a pot, and the symbol for fire, and the symbol for rice. And you put them all together, and you could see what the word meant based on the symbol. So it's a pictogram kind of a language. So there's two kinds of languages, either pictograms or alphabetical, where the symbols don't mean anything. Hebrew is a hybrid. Every letter has meaning, and when you string them together, it has intrinsic meaning whether you like it or not, but you only have a limited number of letters, 22 letters, which have sounds, and it has a phonetic meaning. So there's a duality to the language unlike any other language. So just like in chemistry, you say water. What does the word water mean? Nothing. But H2O, that describes the essence of what it is. So in Hebrew, the word itself represents the essence of what it is. For example, let's say the word for dog. You can hear a few dogs barking. Is kavod, kelev. Anybody know what the word lev? Anybody know what the word lev means? Lev means heart. Ke means like a heart. So kelev is like a heart. Heart is a symbol for unconditional love and loyalty. So if you want to know what the essence of a dog is, why the Almighty created dogs, it was to teach us the concept of unconditional love and loyalty, right? You want to learn about love and loyalty, you just learn that from a dog, right? You don't learn it maybe from your brother. You get into trouble, you get picked up, taken down to the police station, you pick up the phone, you call your brother, you say, "Hey, bro." "Yeah, what's the matter?" "I'm down at the police station. Come get me." His answer, "What'd you do? What happened?" That's your brother, right? What? You call up the dog. "Hey, dog, down at the police station. Come get me." He says, "Where is he? Let me at him." Right? No questions. Unconditional loyalty. He's there. That's what we learned from a dog. All right, so then getting back to Rabbi Akiva's students that lo nahagu kavod ze bazeh. They didn't give honor one to the other. Honor in Hebrew is kavod. It's related to the word kaved, same root. Anybody know what the word kaved is? It means heavy. Heavy. To give honor to somebody is to make them heavy. Oh, wait a second, what do you mean heavy? Like if you have a scale, right? You have two sides of a scale, you put one side on the other, and whatever's heavier, it goes down and the other one goes up, right? On a scale. So if you want to give honor to somebody, to show that they're heavier than you in some way, what do? You stand up. You stand up because they're heavier than you. You're giving them honor, right? So if a Torah sage comes into the room and he's heavier than you in Torah wisdom, what do? You stand up out of respect for, not him, but the wisdom that's walking around in his head. Actually, if a Sefer Torah, if a Torah scroll is brought into the room, we do the same thing, right? As Torah scroll comes into the room, we stand up out of what? Respect. Why? Because there's wisdom in there that I'm lacking. The Torah has wisdom that I need to integrate into myself for my own purposes. So it's heavier than me in wisdom, and therefore I get up out of respect. That's what respect means. So if I'm into boxing and somebody's a better boxer than I am, then I have to give them respect because they're heavier than I am, as it were, in terms of boxing, right? So let's get back to our students. Now notice that the sages didn't say lo kibdu ze bazeh. Didn't say they didn't honor each other. They didn't honor each other. It says lo nagu kavod ze bazeh. They didn't act with kavod one to the other. So what would normally happen, when you have a study partner, it's impossible to get a perfect match. Ideally, you want to get a close match. "Hey, Lawrence, how you doing?" One of my Talmidim, and now he's a teacher. One of my students, now he's a teacher. So what does it mean, lo nagu ze bazeh? They didn't give honor ze bazeh. When you have a learning partner, it's impossible to get a perfect match. Impossible. you know what's going to happen? One's going to know more than the other. One is intrinsically heavier in Torah wisdom than the other. And you know what? People know it right away. You can tell right away, right? We talked about it before, that there's a meritocracy in the Sanhedrin. And you took all of the judges of the Sanhedrin, of the Jewish High Court at the time, they could self-select. They could put themselves in line, knowing who's greater than whom. It's when you're objective about it and your ego's out of the way. You know who you're going to turn to when you got a question. I know when I have questions in Torah, who I'm going to ask for an insight and an answer, because I know who's got more than I do, right? I'm not going to go and necessarily ask the person who doesn't know as much as me. And in here, we have the problem, right? And here we have the problem. Because the sages in the Mishnah teach us, Ezu Chacham, who is the wise person? And we're talking about wisdom, we're talking about life wisdom, Torah wisdom, that's what it is. The Torah is not information. The Torah is information to help me make spiritual life choices, to help me achieve my spiritual potential. Right? So I want to achieve my potential, and I want to go to the wisdom, and so the Torah says, Ezu Chacham, who is the wise person? The wise person, Halomed Mikol Adam, the person who is learning from every single person. Doesn't even say Jew, say anybody. Somebody even who's never learned any Torah. The wise person, the one who's getting wisdom for living, is the one who is currently learning from every Adam. What's the implication? What does that mean? It means that every single human being on the planet has learned life lessons, has learned Torah. They've learned how to be a better spiritual being. And even if I have an accumulation of a lot more Torah wisdom, any single person that I meet in the street, every single one of you, there's 27 of you listening right now, there's something that I can learn from you that I don't have. You appreciate that? I might have rabbinical ordination. I don't know anybody on here has any rabbinical ordination, right? I know Lawrence over there, he's teaching Torah in Toronto, right? So, objectively speaking, right? My Hebrew's probably better than anybody here listening, right? I probably learned more Torah from Torah sages than anybody here, right? So what could be the tendency? The tendency is the teacher, I got nothing to learn from you, right? But there's something each and every one of you there. Hi, Cindy. Hi, Mark. Every single one of you there out there listening right now has some piece of Torah wisdom, because Torah is not just book learning. It says that what came first, the world or the Torah? Seems like the world came first. God created the world, and then he gave us the Torah in the book of Exodus, right? As we're coming up to the festival of Shavuot. And the Midrash answers, no, God looked into the Torah and he created the world. What does that mean? That means that there was a blueprint for the universe, that God had an idea, what he wanted, what his will was. He had it mapped out abstractly in his head, as it were, and then spoke. We'll talk about that another time. Dibur, the next walk I'm going to give. He spoke, the world came into existence according to that original plan. And then what happened? He gave us the blueprint thousands of years later at Sinai. Now, what's the Torah? The Torah, we say, is the blueprint for the universe. The universe is here. So just like an architect has an idea in their head, has the plan, it's all worked out in their head. Now what you do is you map it out on a blueprint in 2 dimensions. You give it to the contractor, they build it, and if they're a perfect contractor and a perfect draftsman of the blueprint, great, perfect architect, the original idea, the 2-dimensional blueprint, and the as-built, the beautiful world around us, is all one and the same thing. And therefore, there's nothing in the physical world that you can't find somehow in the Torah. It's a one-to-one mapping between the universe and the Torah. The Torah is the blueprint of the universe. So therefore, That means that if you experience the world and observe the world properly, you will come to the same conclusion that the Torah is there to teach you. That's the school of hard knocks. You can either learn from reading the book, or you can learn from experiencing life. You'll come to the same conclusion ultimately. And that's why when an elderly person walks into the room, whether they learned Torah officially or not, you stand up. Why? Out of respect for the wisdom, because through living life, they've come to the same conclusions ultimately that the Torah is going to teach you. Now, if you want to avoid the pain, the hard knocks, then read the manual. You want to avoid the hard knocks of messing around with your computer and having it crash and having to call somebody to fix it, read the manual before you use it. That's what we Jews try to do. We want to read the manual before we get into the world so we don't get into trouble and have to call somebody in to help. And when you call that person to help with your computer, what's the first thing they say? Where's the manual? Let me look it up for you. Right? They read the manual and they know how to fix the machine. The Torah means instructions. Word Torah means instructions. It's the user's guide for the universe. So what does it mean? So that means I have to respect each and every one of you out there for the piece of Torah that you have that I don't have. I have something to learn from each and every one of you. You appreciate that. And therefore, if I appreciate that, I have to respect you as much as you're the greatest rabbi in the world. Because without you, I'm not going to be able to learn that particular lesson. You hear that? That was the problem of Rabbi Akiva's students. Lo na'agu kavod ze bazeh. You see, maybe they didn't even need to respect them because, you know what, the greater sage has to stand up. The lesser sage has to stand up for the other one. So there is an objective criteria. But just because that's the case doesn't mean I shouldn't speak to you and treat you as if you are smarter than me. You see that? Lo na'agu b'kavod ze bazeh. They should have, even though one was smarter than the other, you shouldn't put down the one that doesn't know as much as you. You should treat them as if they are smarter than you. And they have something to teach you, even if you are the one who is greatest. And therefore, when you look at the greatest of sages amongst the Jewish people, whether it's Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, Rabbi Bakshi Doron, the people who make it to the top are really the most humblest of all. And they show tremendous respect to everybody that they meet. And this is why they're so beloved amongst the population. Because the population, the little people, feel important because it's true. The greatest sage understands every single person has something to teach them. And therefore they act with respect, even though they are the greatest sage of the generation. And that's the lesson that we have to learn. And when the Jewish people are not united like that, that's what causes the destruction. When we don't treat each other that we need each other for spiritually, no matter who you are, you could be the lowest educated person in the world, but I need you. When we as a Jewish people and the whole world start treating each other that way, then we'll be allowed to be intimately connected with each other. You see that? If you don't treat each other that way, then the Almighty says, that's not why I created you to be a society. I created you to be a society to lift each other spiritually. They teach us, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Bazeh. Every one of the nation of Israel is a guarantor for every other one. And therefore, if they're not doing well, I'm not doing well. So my blessing and my bracha for all of you, for all of us, is that we learn this lesson, to treat each other with respect, but not just respect to be polite, respect to know that my Rosh Hashiva taught me, you have to look at that other person, that they have something spiritually, that it's your job to dig deep to find out what it is that they have to teach you. And when you do that, you will create a tremendous spiritual bond with every human being that comes in your pathway. That's the tshuva that we have to do. That's what we have to learn. That's what we have to work on, to appreciate every single human being. And you know what happened? The wake-up call of those 24,000 students was such that we did learn the lesson. And after 33 days, the plague ended. So my blessing is that we all learn this lesson. We reach out to each other. We're there for each other. And that God willing, on the 33rd day of the Omer, it's the 11th day today, the sun's going down. But another 22 days, another 3 weeks, and it should be that the plague is gone, that the plague ended, and that we can all come on Lag BaOmer and all celebrate together. And I'll have some time in the future to teach you that lesson about what Lag BaOmer is, and that's up in Tzfat, up on the hill over here. We'll get to that. So if anybody has any questions, send me some questions. Post them here, send an email. Love you all. Thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you next time.